So, welcome to Beyond Boundaries with Gerry Coe. Gerry, are you there? Can you make your webcam
Yes.
live for us as well, if you could?
All right.
I know he's there because we've been doing a test.
Here we go. There I am. Okay.
Yay! See, us old dogs can still do new tricks, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. So it's all this technical stuff with computers. It gets to me a bit, you know.
Hey, cool. So Gerry, talk photography tonight. Before we kind of get going with the 8 images, obviously we're all about mobile photography and things really. Before we get fully going, could you basically give us a kind of a brief history of your kind of life in the world of photography, even from the amateur days and so on? Where did it all start for you?
Oh, right. Well, um, I was 12 years old when I first started with photography. I'd say it was a long time ago. Some of my friends say it was 1896 or something like that, but it wasn't quite as old as that. But what happened was that I got interested through a Blue Peter competition, and that started my interest in photography. I kept at it through amateur camera clubs. Just before my 16th birthday, I left school and went to work for a photographer in Belfast, weddings, portraits mostly. I was there with him 2.5 years, and then I moved on to a commercial firm, doing everything, literally from 10-bit cameras right the way down. And eventually, when I left them, I moved on to working freelance, worked for the Northern Ireland Tourist Board for a while. Then I started another business, photography, with one of the best portrait photographers in Belfast. And again, that went on for a number of years, but eventually I went out on my own. I've basically been on my own ever since. I've covered just about almost every genre of photography from the early days right the way through, and enjoyed the commercial work. I thought that was always great. But I said, it came back to haunt me, but I said at one time, oh, I couldn't fancy doing babies and weddings all my life. And well, it comes back to haunt me later on when I started my own studio, and I was doing weddings along. It was a picture framing business as well. I was doing weddings, and then we had a gallery in the front of it. And when that closed down, I took it over and started my full studio of lasting image. And from then on, didn't like everybody color, and those days the brown background. But I very quickly got rid of that and started using white backgrounds. And I believe one of the first people, certainly over here in Northern Ireland, doing that. And then I moved on, and eventually I just did black and white. Didn't do color at all. And I always printed my own black and white. Always never put it out to labs. So why I stopped doing the color, because it just wasn't getting what I wanted. And so black and white was my main thing. And then really, I don't do a lot of color nowadays, but it's still my main thing. Always enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. So when did this passion for mobile photography start for you?
Well, what happened was that myself and a group of mates always go away every year, and about, so what was it, oh dear, 94, what would it be? No, 10 years ago, somewhere like that, 92, 93. I'll probably have notes somewhere here. I bought an iPhone 4. And up until that point, my daughter was handing me her old mobile phones, Nokias and things like this. You couldn't take pictures of those anyway. Although you could probably nowadays, it would be called arty, you know, because it was so awful. But anyway, I bought an iPhone 4, but being a real photographer, I couldn't see how on earth you could take decent photographs with this wee thing. So what happened was, a friend of mine in the States, Dan Burkholder, who had been over to Northern Ireland giving a talk, I'd seen he was doing all these wonderful pictures, and he started out, I think, with the previous model, if it was iPhone 3 or whatever. But and he was doing it, but he was putting a lot of textures over them, obviously to hide all the poor quality. But they were fabulous. And I asked him, I said, "What are you doing with all these wonderful pictures, Dan?" And he just said, he sent me back an email saying, "Selling them, Gerry." So I thought maybe there's something in it. So from that, I started experimenting. But I went with all my mates, went away to Italy and we're in Tuscany, and I had a Nikon and I had my iPhone 4. And I did a wee cold shoe thing, and I had my iPhone sitting on top of my Nikon. So I was taking pictures with a Nikon and backing up with the iPhone. That was the first day. Second day, I was taking pictures with the iPhone and backing up with a Nikon. Third day, I left the Nikon in the hotel safe, and I just used the iPhone. And that really was the journey that was what started me into it. And I've just been going at it ever since.
Good, good, good. We've got quite an eclectic mix of images that you've submitted tonight, isn't it, really? So I think we should start going through them. If you're new to Talk Photography, then please get your questions in as we're going along. We've already got loads of questions in anyway,
Yeah.
but we'll tackle those as we go through. So let's move on to our first image, which is a black and white image of a child.
Yeah, well, this was in my studio. Whenever I stopped doing the color and I was just doing black and white portraits, and slowly I evolved into this high key style. But I was printing all my own stuff. I couldn't send it to the lab because I couldn't get what I wanted. And I was printing all these in my darkroom. And I was printing onto Kentmere document art paper. I don't know if you remember that one at all, but anyway, it was a single weight paper, but it had a texture like watercolor paper.
Yeah.
And it was fabulous. You know, I loved it. And there was no other paper like it. So whenever you were taking these pictures being done on film and then printing them to get this very light tone, and with the grain of the film and also the texture, they really did look what I call them pencil portraits, and that's what they look like. They really look like pencil portraits. So that was the thing that was almost my mainstay of my business. I did families, everything else, but people were bringing their kids to me to have these type of pictures done. And actually, I still get people coming back to me. I still got all my negatives. I'm retired about 10 years now, but I've got all my negatives up in the roof space. And what I do with those is that sometimes a picture falls off a wall, gets damaged, or it happened just recently. When I initially did them, people couldn't afford to buy them all. It wasn't cheap. So they couldn't afford to buy all these. And they've come back years later and said, "We've always wanted these on our walls." So nowadays, what I would do is I would scan the negatives and produce something very, very similar to what I produced in the darkroom. But that was my mainstay of my business.
Cool. So you mentioned about sales already, in fact, about your friend in America. How lucrative has mobile photography been for you?
Sorry, how was it? What for me?
So one of the questions we had through was, how lucrative has mobile photography been for you, or is it more of a kind of an amateur passion?
Oh, I suppose it's a bit of both. It's a passion for me. This my whole thing about doing the iPhone. It doesn't matter what phone you've got, by the way. I just happen to use an iPhone, but it makes very little difference to me, because what I was trying to prove is you don't need a big, stonking big camera to produce good pictures. So what I wanted to do was produce work um, and show how you could do these things with simple product. I was never an equipment freak, so for me it was always about the image, how you got to the image. You don't ask a painter what paints he used or what brushes he used. You accept what's done, and that's the way I like to think of it. Trying to produce something. There are limitations, but you work within the limitations. But now the new phones, everything else. I'm a 15 iPhone 15 Pro Max, and you know quality's fabulous, but there's probably better cameras on phones out there.
Yep.
But I'm very happy with that, you know.
Cool.
That picture you're looking at, by the way.
I beg your pardon?
I was going to say that picture you're looking at now.
Yep.
That was we had a place in Spain, and for about 10 years. And one time I was out there. It was a bit later than we normally were. And there have down there what they call a gota fria, which is massive amounts of rain falls. And there had been just before we had got out there, and it had cleared away. And I looked out, there was a river behind where we had our apartment. And I was looking at the damage as I walked along, and as I walked back, I just saw this view looking towards the mountains and the next village up from us, and those beams of light coming down. It was just absolutely amazing. I took a couple of shots, and I've always loved that picture as well. Always reminds me of that time in Spain. You know, it was super time.
So as far as the image is concerned, I mean, there's obviously lots of questions coming through about apps. Would this have gone through a specific app, or what's the usual workflow of a digital file for you? I know we've got another stunning landscape coming up in the next image. But
I'm going to have to be going to be very honest here. This one was taken on the big camera. It was not on the iPhone. When I say big camera, what I maybe had a Fuji, and I had the phone with me, but it was the Fuji image that I actually used. Later on, you're going to see more stuff, and how I would process these and what I would use. And what I did with that, sometimes what I have to do, I don't have a big camera nowadays, but if I was taking stuff on a bigger camera, I tend to import it into my phone to work on it there rather than work in Photoshop. I've almost lost the ability in Photoshop because I don't use it very much, and therefore I can do so much more on my phone than I can on Photoshop. So that would have been processed probably with something like Snapseed, which is what I use an awful lot. And I can talk about, as we go through them, I can talk about specific things I did. You know, sometimes there's not a lot done, just a bit of darkening of the sky, the foreground blacked in there a wee bit, just to get rid of a wee bit of foreground detail. And, you know, doing this on your phone, well, for me, it's relatively simple. And nowadays, you've got the files, so you can go big with these. Not a problem, you know.
Very good. A couple of questions coming through. As far as when you're working on an image in the likes of Photoshop, are you a fan of Actions or a specific software plugin? Do you use anything?
No, I don't. If I'm working on Photoshop, I'm very basic about it. I don't really go into an awful lot of detail. I have worked on Actions the pencil portrait you saw beforehand, working on that in Photoshop, I would have, the only action I really did have, once I got the tone that I wanted in the photograph, then it was just a case of putting a vignette around it and bleaching that out to white, but giving quite a transition in it, so it's not a sharp line and it's moving, blending in slowly to the white background. The portrait, the previous portrait, would have had probably at least one light on the background and possibly two soft boxes either side of the sitter, and then underneath a reflector underneath the light and all the shadows. So nearly all the work was done in the taking, and it was just finalizing it and touching up. But actions for producing something very minimal, very minimal.
Okay, good. Apps. Let's move on to the next image anyway, because I think it might answer kind of the discussion as we're going. So there was a question on, do you like using Hipstamatic to take the photographs or to adjust the images, or not at all?
Well, then this was a perfect example of Hipstamatic. This was one of the first ones I took on that trip away to Tuscany, and with the guys, we went out and we ended up going along these white roads, and you know, just tracks. And eventually we saw this tree, and we all stopped the car, and we all piled out. And the guys got out with their big cameras on tripods, and I stood there with my iPhone taking pictures. And as it happened, you know, before they'd all got their pictures and finished, they were taking out their phones and taking pictures as well, but they weren't converted at that time, so they couldn't have worked. But that wee picture, what happened was the original of it was Hipstamatic. In fact, nearly all the pictures I took on that trip to Tuscany were nearly all Hipstamatic. But what happened was, on the plane home, one of my mates sitting beside him on the plane, he says, I was going through the files. He says, well, what could you do with those? I said, well, you can do a lot of things with it. And so I said, I'll show you. So what happened was, I opened that one, and I opened it up in, oh dear, I can't even remember what I opened it. I put a texture onto it, and then the sort of like the crack bit coming across it as well. And then I put another texture onto as well, a bit lighter. I created a border onto it. And I said, so you can do things like that. And he says, it's all right. I said, well, I quite like that one. So that picture, I put it into, over here we have the Royal Ulster Academy, which is the same as, you know, the RA in England and various things like that, and the Scottish have theirs as well. So it's for artists for all genres, and there wasn't many photographers in those days putting into that. And I put it in, and I had 10 for sale, and it actually sold 12. So it did me quite well. It also, a slight variation on that one, also won me the BIPP what was it, art thing of, oh, they're gone, forgotten the name of it. But it got me £1,000 there. The sale of the prints got me 2,500, 2,000. It's been on a book cover, so it earned me about £3,500 in that wee trip, which I thought wasn't bad, but I've never done it since.
There were some questions coming through about, do you feel that the digital camera images of today are the new Polaroid of yesterday?
They're different. it's just a moving on. It's a progression. Um, Digital images. Yes, I work with Polaroid, and I've seen what can be done with Polaroid and things like that, and all the art that can be done with them. I mean, there are apps probably that'll give you you can do Polaroid frames and get a certain look about it. I can't say it's the same, but it's just moving on. It's different, you know. It depends what you're doing. I listen to people sometimes in seminars, and they talk about pictures, and they said, "Oh yes, out of my phone, I can get maybe an A3," which is stupid. You can get a 40 by 30 inch, as I have done, of of prints out. And nowadays, with the upsizing and everything else that can be done, they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you can go to any size with these things. There's no limitations on that at all. But no, it's just different. That's all.
Okay, there's a question just come through about they used to play around with Polaroid, moving the emulsion when they've heated it up with a spoon. Do you feel that this art photography has a similarity to that? I think there's
Yes.
another image coming, in fact, of this flower cellar, and basically it reminds me a little bit of that fine art kind of thing. But you understand what I mean, yes?
I understand that. It's an emulsion lift. That was what it was called, yeah. And then you slide it off and onto a watercolor paper. And yes, I had a few attempts of that as well. And who was it? One of our well-known friends did all the manipulation when the emulsion was wet. You were able to use sort of like end of a pencil or something, and you could rub it, and it moved out all the wet emulsion that was still there into different. And you got fabulous results from it. Names out of my head, but I know who I'm thinking about. You know,
I know that a photographer in the UK is not with us anymore, Dennis Highlander. I think he was playing around with impressionistic Polaroids.
That's right.
With that kind of, is that the guy that you're on about?
That's who it was. Just name wouldn't come into my head.
Yeah.
You know,
but yeah, I think for many we're seeing the similarity. Those are us who played around with Polaroid art and kind of the kind of the mobile image, the digital image of today is kind of has that similarity and things really. Question on, let's move on to the next image anyway. No, well, we can't in fact, because there's a question just come through about, can you explain what you've done to this image and what app? I think it's Hipstamatic now.
Okay, all right. I think one of the apps I used is no longer available, and this is what happens. But basically, what I did with that picture, I remember this was a lot of years ago, and I'm trying to bring it all to mind here. What I did with it first was I actually used blur. I blurred the whole image. Then I used a pencil to bring back detail in the grass along the roadway, in the middle of the road, and the tree. Next, I would have put it into, let's see, I'm going to look up here and see what I'm doing here. I probably would have put it into distressed, which is called now distressed FX. And that would have given me the texture. There may have been in distress the second texture I put on top of that, which was the crack marks coming across it. That would have been a second texture put into it. I then forget the outer border, but I then would, as you see, the border was softened along with a lot of the rest of it, and I left it soft because I like the way it blended in. People who are using what do you call where am I here? I'm lost again here. I'm busy thinking, getting myself all thing. Was using the app Hipsomatic. Sorry. You'll know they all have different borders, and that was a fairly straight shot. It was pure black and white when I took it. John S. lens would have been one of them, and I can't remember the other thing into it. But that one worked quickly, but how I work with things, there could be 10 or 15 variations before I find the one I like. So I can be sitting there, I'll save it, I'll go back again and try different textures. And people say, what is your, like this question, what is your workflow? I don't take notes. I just go with the feel. That's all I can do. But that is basically how I work that. And if I had that today, that same picture, black and white, I probably would end up doing something slightly different. Because it don't have the same things. But you know, but it's a progression, and that's all you can do with it. Like a painter, you can go too far, but the beauty of this is you can go back again to your original and start again. So if I can explain more in any others, I will try and do that. But
okay. Let's move on to the next image anyway. This is the kind of the impressionistic kind of thing I was on about.
Right.
Are you a fan of lenses for your mobile camera?
No. They're great, but quite honestly, my whole thing with carrying around a phone is the fact that I don't have a whole gadget bag of lenses. If I got the lenses and started putting them on, now Glenn Jules is brilliant. He's showing his lenses and the apps and things like that. But if I start putting them on, I've got a lot of fiddling around to do. And a lot of times, a lot of the pictures I take are they might be spur of the moment, and I don't want to start putting lenses on. I don't want to start putting a telephoto on to get that wee bit closer. Excuse me. If it's I might have to just reject the picture because I don't have a telephoto. The wide angle I feel is wide enough on the iPhone 15, and the other ones are fine, and it's 5 times on the zoom, and that covers nearly everything. In fact, it's pretty good for portraits. You know, you have your portrait, but even the 5 times will work brilliantly for portraits as well. Yeah. So no, I don't do it.
The cameras on the phones have come a long way anyway, haven't they? Yeah. Especially on the iPhone 15 Pro, you know, the 3 lenses on there. Basically, it's a lens in its own right, isn't it? Really, whereas when you used to have the one lens on an iPhone specifically, the lenses, you know, the wide angle adapters and so on had a real benefit because you were stuck with what that one lens could do.
Yeah.
But the new lenses give you a natural kind of telephoto without having to use an adapter and things really. Okay, yeah. Let's talk about this image. Can you talk us through it?
Right. Well, now, again, slight thing. I went to Cuba, and we got right in Cuba, went to the hotel, got up the next morning. My phone camera, none of them would work. Absolutely nothing worked. And if anybody, you've been to Cuba, there's no internet unless you really go searching for it and pay for it and everything else. And I couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. Luckily, I had a Fuji with me, and I took all my Cuba pictures on the Fuji. But that means I took them on that, but I put them into the phone to work on them. So this particular picture, I saw that guy walking down the street, and if you saw the original, behind it, you can see the colors a bit. On the right hand side there's red, behind them there's this light red. there were people to the left of him and things like that. And it was just really messy. And so I put it in to the phone, and I wanted to turn it into an arty picture. I can't paint and I can't draw, so basically my camera becomes my palette, and I start working on that. So I put it into the phone and I started working on it, and I opened an app called Repix. Now you can't get it; they've just stopped using it anymore. I still got it on the phone, but I was in touch with the people that make it, and they said no, they're not doing it anymore, and you can't get it. I've been working on a lot of other pictures here, and I'll tell you my alternative. So what happened with this one was put it into the phone. I started with this Repix, and in the Repix, there's what they call the chalk brush, a lot of wee brushes, and there was a chalk brush. So everything is chalked over. Oh, by the way, first of all, I apart from lightening it, I increased the color saturation quite a bit because I really wanted to bring that forward. So then I covered more or less everything covered in this brush, and then I go back in again and I use a fine brush, and I would have taken off all the blur and the chalk marks all on the figure, so that he's sitting out from the background. So that to me is the way I would tend to work. I would sometimes put a texture on. I didn't do it here. This is all pretty straightforward with that Repix. The other one, people, sorry, if people look this up here 1 second, one of the things that I have started to use, it's one called Oil Painter, OIL Painter. There's a number of brushes in that, and I use that. I've been experimenting with that, and that's giving me a look which is not dissimilar. Once you've got all the brushes, there's one particular brush that gives almost like a chalky sort of feel to it, pastel-y look. So you just move in, and like a lot of these things, you're working on the phone, and if I have my pictures on here and I'm working away on this, you have to zoom in. Your brush size doesn't change, so you get big strokes when it's just at the full screen size, but zoom right the way in, and if you use a finer brush, then you get much finer strokes and you get more detail, things like that. Again, sometimes what I will do with a picture, say like this, I will then go into an image called Image Blender. Now, Image Blender, there's variations in this, but I quite like it. It's simple to use. So you put the original image, the high color image in first. Then you put the chalky one in next. Blend the two together. But again, just using a brush, you can bring back the detail into the face of the people involved. If you do it too much, you're really back to the photograph. So sometimes I might put a wee tiny texture over that as well, just to blend the whole thing together. It's whenever sometimes they take away an app, and then you're trying to find again a similar one. I've been searching and searching because other people have been asking this, and I've been trying to find. And that oil painter so far is coming up quite good at the moment. You know, limited range, but it's quite good.
Very good. Questions through. One for me, in fact. Can you enter digital photography from a phone into the Xenon Awards? Yes, you can. This is a celebration of photography, so anybody can enter. And remember, in March, anybody can enter, even non-members can. So please feel free to submit via the Xenon page, but you can enter images on that shot and taken on basically anything. Advice on upscaling an image for big wall art. Anything, Gerry?
That one there, yes. That was, again, one of the boys away trip. And we were in the Costa de la Luz. And it was a big kite surfing festival on. And we all drove down there and I started taking pictures. A lot of the guys had their big cameras, you know, getting the guys skimming over the waves and everything else. But I just saw this group of people walking towards me. And what's now the buzzword is ICM, you know, intentional camera movement or blurry pictures. And I've been doing blurry pictures for years before it became ICM, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But this one here, I probably took it at on, let's see, that would have been on, I'm going to check here again to make sure. I should have written down my notes better here. Probably slow shutter. I use slow shutter a lot for ICM stuff. But there wasn't, I would say that's probably maybe a quarter of a second, maybe half a second exposure as the people walk towards me. And apart from enhancing the color, I've done absolutely nothing else to that. And beauty is I've sold it about half a dozen or more times, you know, so and it looks, I've got even in the other room here a big metal print of it, which looked fabulous, you know, really brings out those colors. But literally that is dead simple, dead straightforward, quarter, half second at most, not moving the camera too much, just letting your natural shape take it. And so you can see everything there, you know what's going on. It's not blurred beyond all recognition,
Yep.
but it just gives that arty feel to it.
You might have missed the question I asked. It was about upscaling images. Is there any advice on upscaling an image for printing?
A what image?
What do you use or what do you do to upscale an image for a very large print?
Right, sorry, right, okay. I use you can use Photoshop. It'll double and it'll double again. But if you're wanting to work on the phone, one of the ones that I found very good is Smart Resize. There's a couple I have, but that's the one I tend to go to. I did a test one time using Photoshop, older version of On1 Resize, another online one, and Smart Resize. I brought them all up to about the same thing, and I couldn't tell a big difference. There maybe was a slight difference, maybe in Photoshop or On1 compared to the Resize here. But quite honestly, there wasn't an awful lot to it at all, you know. So if you use Resize, you go up to 4 times straight away, and it's really very good. And especially like me, if you're doing lots of textures on it, believe you me, you're not going to have to worry about people, oh, that's not sharp, or look at that, or you know, all these criticisms you get. Sorry.
Excellent. Okay, some animals very close to my heart, being a Welshman, yes. So talk about the sheep.
Right, the sheep, that came about. We had Joe Cornish over for a 2-day workshop one time, but he came over 2 days early. So myself, John Muskelly, and your Rooney friends, we took him up to Donegal. And so we went to Donegal and we're doing all these lovely beach scenes. Joe had his biggish camera out and the other 2 guys had their camera. And I just wandered around my iPhone. And we're up and down these sand dunes. And what happened was that a couple of the other guys are a lot fitter than I am. And we would ask them as well, coming up some of those sand dunes was really tough going. So I went one of these last beaches they were going down. I said, guys, I'm not going down. I'm staying up here. And the rain started to come on. So I thought, oh, I'm away back to the car. So walking back through the field was quite carefree. And I was walking along and I sort of heard something behind me. And there's this flock of about 40 sheep following me. And I thought, what the heck? So anyway, I must have thought I was going to leave them food or wherever they're going, but I don't know. They followed me up to the fence, and I got out over the fence, and I was about to get into the car. I looked back, and there were this wee group of sheep still watching me. So I just took a couple of pictures of them, and I just really just loved the way that came through. You know, it really worked. And again, this is one where I've used different apps on this one. There's been a bit of the one I was mentioning there before about repicks. Yeah, there's other ones I've used. I'll have to think here which ones I did use on this here, because again I blurred a lot of it. I'm using my finger. What I'm doing on my screen is I'm just going around like that, getting the blur and getting the texture of the paint and things, and then I'm bringing the sheep back, the faces back, but I was leaving most of their body and everything else blurred as all part of it. It didn't take too long to do that one. It was fairly quick. But again, that one sold to quite a few farmers and over here. They love the idea of it, you know. But I think that was probably a straight shot with the iPhone camera, and it may have been the iPhone 10 when I took that. But I use the straight camera a lot. I do use other cameras occasionally, but I find the straight camera works very well for me, you know, a lot of the times. And then I can go on to do what I want with them.
Okay, a couple of things with this image. First of all, as soon as this image came on, it lit up the question panel with all the fantastic comments about OMG, love this image. There's loads of comments. I'm not even going to go through them all, but there was one that says the true combo between photography and art. So very well done on that. But it lit up, seriously. So you can have a big slap on your back for that one, Gerry.
I appreciate that, everybody. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, you know, and isn't it great? You know, I'm teaching my grandkids, and they're youngest one's just short of 3 now, but the kind of the twins are 5, the other boy's 5, and then I got a 7-year-old, and teaching them what to do with the camera, it just makes sense to them. You know, they go along with their iPad and they take a photograph, and then they're fiddling with it themselves. I cannot even comprehend the world of art in 50 years time. I literally cannot comprehend it at all in things, really. But this is very, it reminds me of a very famous Welsh artist, and he would paint this kind of image up in North Wales and everything else with it. And as soon as it came on, I went, oh my God. Right, back to the questions, Mark. So the texture that we see, is it just a texture applied, or is it individually stroked with the finger? Sounds a bit weird when you say it out loud. I think what they mean by that, the kind of the brush marks and everything else, is this a finger mark, or is this just a texture being applied over the top of it?
No, it's brush marks, your finger brush marks mostly on this. And that's what's doing it, and keeping a bit of blur into it as well, so as to soften the whole thing. I probably used probably the same program, but it may have been different. I'm just looking at the strokes myself to see what's there. Sometimes I'm not a big fan of going into a program which you push a button and it does all the work for you. I could use it, but it will only be the start of using an image. If I get something I like on it, then I will then start to add more textures and do more things to it and play around with it. It doesn't feel as if I've done anything to an image if you just push one button. So I'm afraid I have to work at it and I have to do that.
I think it's like an action.
Yeah,
I think it's like an action, isn't it? You start with an action, but then you have to put your own personality on the image. Otherwise, it's just basically, you're just. I'm going to use the word cheating. I don't mean it in that way, but it's painting by numbers at that point. You're basically pressing a button. However, what you can do, of course, is you can save your styles on different apps, and you can, if you have a style, you can start to apply it, into an impressionistic kind of element and things really. But yeah, absolutely. Somebody just has said it's a new beginning of finger painting.
Well, see, that's why I've always said I can't paint and I can't draw. So my phone is my palette to try to produce something. I'll be honest with you now. I'm not all, but some of my arty friends, I mean, real artists who actually use paintbrushes and things, some of them said, why do you do that? Because we can do that sort of thing. What we want to see from you is your lovely black and white images. And you get sometimes that, but nearly all my photography friends all say, no, I love this, so two camps on it a wee bit.
There's always going to be somebody with opinion. Okay, the penultimate image. Talk about this one for us.
Right. If anybody's been to Rotterdam and the cube houses, they've been photographed millions of times. You lie on your back and you photograph up and you get all the angles coming in. And I did that too. Again, this is a trip to Amsterdam. We took the train out to Rotterdam, went to the cube houses and took the photographs. And one of the things that really interests me as well is collage work. I like the idea of collage and using pictures. Now, a lot of collage artists will use things from magazines and things like that, paste them up and everything else, and they will produce these fabulous stuff. I wish I had their vision sometimes. I really do. So I have to do it my own way. But I decided I'm not going to use external sources. I'm going to use my own images. And I thought, well, I like the angles, and I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll cut up my pictures, various pictures of the cube houses, and I just went around the edges of them and then just started laying them out on a page until I got something that really worked very well for me. And that's why I like that, because I'm using my work rather than somebody else's work, and it's important to me that as well, because I had something up on the website there or on Facebook, and it was all circles. And I'd cut some of my photographs up into circles, and I was thinking about how to lay them out. And they'd been sitting in the other room on a bed, and they'd been moved around, and I went past them and I looked at them and I thought, that's quite good. Between moving the bed and moving things to the bed, they'd formed into a sort of a pattern, and I just left them like that. And these are just layered circles of 3 photographs of mine. And that's the way I like to look at things with collage. I have so many friends, artists, I know photography friends, and people who are avant-garde about what they produce their work and everything else. And I just love the idea of my work coming out like this. And that was one of the successful ones I like very much.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to the last image. There's a question about the backup of the original iPhone image. What do you do, and how do you store them?
Well, they're stored on the computer, really. I take them off. Well, I haven't said that of about 5,000 or something on the phone at the moment, maybe 6,000. But I normally, if I'm going to do something with them, they stay on the phone for a very long time because I come back to them. And then I think, oh, I could use that as an overlay, or I could use that as a texture. So they're all on there, but they are stored in the on the computer. So I know they're always there, and then I can throw them back into the iPhone if I need to. Simple that there. I mean, I've got them on the computer. I have a backup hard drive and a backup of a backup. So all the photographs are all there as well. So I don't lose any of them.
Very good. And this image?
Right. Well, it is in Bologna. My wife and away on holiday, and we're out on a trip out. And this is where all the lovely food in Bologna. There's a lot of lovely restaurants and great food. And we ended up sitting outside as we cafe. And as I was sitting there, we just about finished the meal, and I saw this guy coming along the street. And I said to Lorna, there's a photograph. You know, I got to get this guy. This was part of my fellowship panel with the BIPP. But anyway, I said, I've got to get this guy. So I jumped down and went over to him. And I don't speak Italian, but I asked if I could do his photograph. He said yes. And so it took about half a dozen shots. The trouble was, he kept looking everywhere else. And there's only about 2 pictures, maybe 3, where I've got eye contact with him. But as you see, what's happened here, it's a busy street. And it was a bad place to take him, but I couldn't really move him. Behind him, the sky, I've darkened it quite a bit there, and there's still a wee bit of tone in it, but it was white buildings, there was white buildings, there was people to the right, everything else, taking down highlights like mad. I spent, I don't know how many hours on that picture, just trying to get the tones right into it, keeping that detail on the face. I then, when I get near the end of an image, I will shorten it a bit, not a lot, but just give it a, I want that depth into the face. I want to get all those tones in the face. If you saw the original image, you'd wonder how it got to that in some ways. But that's what I like. It's still me with my old black and white days. I still, if printing in the darkroom, I would be toning down things like mad, burning things in, holding things back. And you're just doing the same thing, only differently on your phone or Photoshop, you know. Probably could have done that easier in Photoshop, except I knew the materials and knew how to do it better on my phone than I did on the than Photoshop. But it took a lot of hours to get that one.
Excellent. Well, some absolutely amazing images there, Gerry, and all the kind of comments coming through is just fantastic. A couple of questions to finish off with. As far as software on the computer is concerned, do you have any experience with Topaz and On1?
Not Topaz. I did try it a few years back. On1, I have it on the computer, but I don't use it a lot. I've been keep getting emails to upgrade and everything else, but because I don't use it a lot, I haven't done it. But I do like On1, but it would take me ages to relearn it all, get back into it again. So
I like the original On1. I like the original On1. In fact, I think they've just tried to become a new Photoshop, really, and things, which is just a bit
that's
of a shame.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. So submitting images for competitions, if it's digital art, that's a nice way to put it. So very well done, everybody. Are there restrictions that you've come across, and should they be worried about submitting digital images into competitions?
No, no. As long as it's all your own work. Some people, there might be a problem if you're using textures that are not your own. People may say, well, that's not your work now. That being terribly strict, but some competitions might say you can't use it. Everything has to be your own. But if you want textures, just go out, photograph brick walls, photograph plaster walls, photograph the footpath, anything like that. There's textures everywhere. But sometimes it's just handy using one that's already made. And Distressed FX I like a lot because it gives me some good textures, and I like it. But if I'm putting into a competition, I would read the rules very carefully to see what they say about that.
Great. Do you use the, so specifically this is based around your iPhone that you're using now. Do you use the camera iPhone to take the photograph, or are you using a specific app? I think you talked about the slow shutter one anyway.
Yeah.
So besides for that, are you using anything else?
Well, 90% of the, well, 80% of the time, I probably use the camera on the phone. I don't necessarily shoot in RAW because the file sizes are absolutely enormous, and if you're putting texture over it, I can't see the point of it in some ways. So I use maximum JPEG, and that seems to work fine. Other cameras I use, yes, Hipstamatic. I'll use Reflex and Reheld. Reheld's very good, actually. I did a picture recently there, my screensaver at the moment, and I was walking into Bangor. We had a very stormy day, and the waves were crashing in. And what happened was that I held Reheld. Now, what it does is you can hold it maybe a couple of seconds, and it'll give you blurry water, a bit like live on the live button, but you can give you that there, but it'll keep anything steady, it'll keep it short. But I had it open for 9 seconds, but I bounced it on a wall, and so I got these waves crashing up. But because it was you getting the blur of the waves coming over and everything else, but also as well, I do the same thing again with slow shutter. I can have that on for 2 or 3 seconds and let the waves crash up and hold it basically steady, so the waves are moving, but the pier or whatever else is dead short. So they're the sort of things. What else is there? Some of the apps are extremely good, but sometimes the reason why I use the app from the camera or from the phone is it's quick, it's easy. But there's other things like where are we here? Moment, they do a lot of lenses as well. You've got slow shutter, classic. If you want something that does you tintype images, you can get a tintype app. Average Cam Pro, which takes lots and lots of pictures, so that's quite a good one as well for if you want to hold it for about 2 seconds, and it takes a lot of separate images. Some people out there may have heard, what is it, Pep Ventosa, is that the name, I think, where he did pictures of trees and things, and he moved around them, kept barking about the same place, and you move around them. So he's getting this sort of wraparound thing, many exposures, but you still got the trunk of the tree pretty sure, you know. It's quite an interesting technique. So, but there's so many talented people out there doing fabulous work. You know, and sometimes I wish I had their what's going on in their heads a bit in mine as well, because you know, it's you'd always like to expand. You never want to stop. I can't stop. It's just me, and I like to experiment, and I like to keep on going. That's me. That's it. Any other questions there?
You know, Gerry, absolutely. I think that's a great place to stop, to be honest. Brilliant. There's been loads of people in tonight, loads and loads of comments. I'll try and put some of the stuff on the Facebook page tomorrow as a reminder about some of the apps and things, really. But Gerry, thank you very much for joining us live on another Talk Photography. And fingers crossed, we've already discussed about getting you back again for another session on something as well. So watch this space. Thanks again, okay. Gerry. Take care. Thanks
everybody. Much indeed, everybody. Thanks for all your comments.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Cheers. Bye.